First, let's start with the state of Michigan, where Raymond Business Consulting, a consulting firm who represents cannabis companies with revenue ranging from $5 to $100 million, provided some detailed information on the state of the overall healthy industry in the state of Michigan. And there's some really telling information here. So first off, Anthony, maybe explain the significance of this report and why investors should really take note of this report.
Yeah, so it was a pretty interesting report. I found it was by Raymond Business Consulting. They're a professional services firm that do audits and advisory work across the board, broad spectrum. They do have a couple of cannabis clients, and this caught my eye into some of the internals from a capital markets perspective that are going on in the Michigan market. Had some interesting data points, and the reason why I brought it up is because it can kind of lean into what's going on at Sunstream with them picking up Skymint. With SNDL, the Gage assets that are key and integral to the business of TerraSend, and then maybe some other MSOs going into the Michigan market in the downstream, as it does seem like the general health is on the mend. So just to get into the data, nearly half, or 47% of the participants were vertically integrated, meaning they completely own seed to sale. In those businesses, those assets are ripe for the taking. If somebody wants to come in from an M&A perspective into the market. One thing that was daunting was nearly half said they plan to raise capital within the next 12 months.
What's that tell you?
Don't want to be doing that in a high rate environment. Don't want to be doing that really in general right now, especially if you're vertically integrated. If you can handle the debt service, okay. But on a go forward basis, these companies in that kind of market, if you're going to survive, you need to be free. You need to be producing free cash flow, especially if you're one of these craft, smaller producers that aren't going to be able to get the scale as someone with a large operation in that market is. What were some other things?
Also worth noting too, I was going to say the average annual revenue per cannabis store in the state is between 1 and 3 million. So clearly, go ahead.
That's a pretty fat spread for me. I would have liked to see it a little bit tighter, just so you can really extrapolate what this could mean when looking at one of the larger companies like a TerraSend or like a Skymint. 1 to 3 is it's a broad spread. As far as I'm concerned.
I know.
Granted, there are a ton of retail in Michigan. And one of the other data points I thought was interesting was that 71% of the businesses are not rewarding employee stock options. Now, I don't really think that this should be common practice in the cannabis space, as it's something that we've seen in tech. And with a lot of these businesses, you can pick and choose who you want to offer stock options to in your business. And there's nothing better at building culture and a sustainable business than getting your employees to buy in from an overarching perspective. ESOPs work. ESOPs get sticky employees. They also create culture, like I alluded to. I'd like to see a lot more of this in that space. Granted, all these businesses were between $5 and $100 million in revenue. So there's some optionality here with the assets and the CFOs that were actually interviewed, but it was definitely some interesting points into a market that's throwing off about $270 million a month in revenue.
$270 a month. Wow.
This report I put in the TDR top 7 cannabis developments, and that was the one thing that stood out as well. That over 50% of these companies need to raise money, and this is not an ideal environment. So there could be a sticky situation here, but at least in terms of the pubcos, Gage, cannabis with TerraSend, that business is still doing well. Correct, Andy? That's what we're hearing.
Yeah. And via Ziad and Jason at Investor Day, they're looking to expand their portfolio, their portfolio of retail within the state of Michigan. They have a calculus. Yeah, they have a calculus that adding incremental doors brings on X amount of incremental revenue, and it's already profitable from the way that they have their mousetrap set up in Michigan. So a lot of these assets, over half need to raise money in the next 12 months. You've got to kind of think that some of them are going to get the door slammed on them, and they're going to become acquisition targets. In the near future.
That's actually good news for TerraSend. We saw the same thing
on the dollar.
Saw the same thing with Merrimid. Went into receivership and got some assets from the Ermont dispensary that went into receivership for pennies on the dollar. So I imagine TerrAscend would be a candidate. Some of these will be a candidate for TerrAscend to acquire too in receivership or outright buyout at very attractive prices.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is probably an inflection point too for the market where you start to see larger MSOs come in. It's always been a mystery as why there aren't really too many of them operating in the space in the state due to the unlimited license nature of the business of the state. But if we're starting to see margins stabilize, prices stabilize, the health of the industry kind of starts to mature, and there's going to be potential valuable M&A targets, I would start to bet that some of the MSOs are going to go in there and pick some stuff up sooner or later down the road.
Now you understand on Investor Day, as much as they were outlining all the states that they operate in, time and time again, you just heard the management say how excited they were for the state of Michigan. You can see why. Okay, let's now focus on a political angle where Ohio Governor Mike DeWine, somebody needs to sit him down and give him a glass of water, but he's taking aim at a cannabis initiative ahead of Ohio's November 7th legislation vote. Ben, what exactly is this initiative, and should the people of Ohio be concerned at all with this adult use initiative ballot or vote, I should say, passing on November 7th?
I think you should be slightly concerned. I mean, it isn't an overwhelming majority. And for viewers who don't know, it's issue 2 that goes on the Ohio ballot. So that is the adult use recommendation to recreationalize cannabis that goes to voters in the state. And it has about a 57% approval, according to the latest polls going in. And Mike, Governor DeWine doesn't like this, and he's sort of stating this, that his opposition, and he's leading the push to persuade Ohioans to say no. And he's not the only politician in the state. There are a lot of people who are actually against this measure, and he's one of them. And he's for he's against the abortion part as well. So he's lending a skeptic hand to this. Maybe he's trying to influence sentiment for the upcoming vote. We have the pre-vote already happening right now for early voting already happening, but he's definitely not for it, and maybe he's trying to influence in other ways. And I don't know, maybe he'll try to stand the way somehow, and hopefully if it doesn't pass.
If he's not for it, and 57% of the state are for it, he's really putting his neck out there.
Yeah. Do you think there's concerns? Like, Ohio has been one of the most hard hit, devastated states in the country to have been decimated by the whole OxyContin epidemic. And I know cannabis is so far removed from OxyContin, but do you think that could have something to play in it, knowing that there's just been abuse and addiction that's spread like wildfire within that state, as to why he's, here we go, just another narcotic that's people want?
So, number one, cannabis is not a narcotic. Number 2, sure, but people have used cannabis to get off of opioids, to get off of opioid addiction, and people have used it to get off of addiction from those kind of substances in general. I don't know if I see the correlation between the two, but I can definitely understand where you're coming from.
Maybe these politicians that lack.
No. I understand where you're coming from. They just dealt with an opioid epidemic, and now they don't want a bunch of people walking around Main Street all high all day. That's not going to happen. It's been proven that doesn't happen.
He should be more for it, because a lot of people, like Anthony said, a lot of people use cannabis to actually wean off opioids. So this should be his friend. But the fact that he's saying things like he doesn't think the little bit of money that comes into legalization is worth the damage, quote unquote, to the people of Ohio. It's just that sort of inflammatory language that just, coming from the governor, right? Not just some sort of lobbyist or anything like Sam lobbyist. I just don't understand where we are today, and people saying those kind of things.
But it's where these guys grew up. It's reefer madness. It's the war on drugs. These are the guys that are fully ingrained in that culture. These are the guys that are behind this, and these are the guys that are going to take it to the grave to make sure that this stuff gets impeded all the way. These happen to be the good old boys that are in government right now. There's some of them that have changed their tune. There's others that aren't, and they could also be in bed with people that don't want cannabis to come full circle.
Yeah.
So it sucks, but it's not very surprising.
Clearly designed to sway sentiment.
Correct.
Clearly designed to sway sentiment and try to get people to not vote for it when the full vote comes up on the 7th.
Like how you outlined that cannabis is not a narcotic too.
It's not.
Technically it is, but it shouldn't be.
Technically, yeah.
Agreed.
One question that we've been asked, and I mean, it's something that's gone on a lot around Twitter, is with Ascend. Is there any reason why Ascend is not included in the MSOS index? Or, I mean, is there a certain criteria that you guys are looking at with certain issuers?
Well, it's it's not an index, and so
No.
every stock, we're selecting, and I would say it's due diligence. Everybody do your own due diligence.
Okay. Yeah.
There's hardly any time frames that stock would have added to the fund's performance. I know it popped last week. Cheers to them on some good earnings, but besides last week, no, people ought to say, hey, Dan, good job on avoiding that stock.
Yeah.
Instead of asking me questions about it.
Yeah. Ben, go ahead, bud.
Now, Dan, I wanted to actually ask you about the structure of the fund. I know there's a lot of speculation. Probably one of the hot topics is how MSOs plays into some of the the ARB spreads and all the activity that goes on the underlying on the CSC. So I want to ask, how are the swaps involved with that in terms of the price action that happens on the CSE and sometimes the volatility you see there?
Yeah, and I'm really happy to talk about this stuff and if somebody doesn't know, we also have our own alpha nooner every day at noon on various platforms. I'm on it virtually every Tuesday. But I'm happy to be on here with you guys because we talk about this stuff, and hopefully this is a little different audience, and hey, we want to educate up on this. So remember, everybody, we're talking about cannabis stocks listed on small exchanges in Canada for the most part, traded OTC in the United States. OTC stocks in the US have no NYSE closing auction. Their microcap stocks are volatile as hell. We said that when we launched this fund. Yeah. And then, so no one would be surprised by extreme volatility and prices that can be pushed around, sometimes with, tens of thousands of dollars of notional or less, or a couple 100,000 shares. So no one should be surprised by anything going on in these stocks. I'm still going to come back and answer your question, Ben. The other thing is because we're in the ETF business, we compare ourselves to other ETFs out there. Heck, I like to think Tim Seymour's a friend. He's a great guy, a smart guy.
Yep.
MSOs is outperforming his fund this year. Now, we don't go bragging on our performance because we're down. Everybody knows we're down. Cannabis stocks are down. So please, I want to caveat this. This is not advisor shares pounding our chest with look at our performance. But if people ask questions about MSOS, the fund, and its structure, and every time we buy shares, we got to pay a commission. Most of the fund is in total return swaps. Total return swaps aren't free. We've never hid that fact. They're not too expensive. We're paying like SOFR plus a small percentage. It's in our annual report. We have a couple different counterparties, but we also have a ton in cash because it's collateral for the swaps and interest rates have gone up. So we're earning a ton of interest on those. Is there a spread? Of course there's a spread, there's a cost. So I didn't mean to pick on Tim Seymour because he has a real good fund too. But if you look at all the cannabis ETFs, all of them out there, it's MJ and there's a handful of others. Again, not bragging on our performance, but we're sucking a little bit less than the others this year. So even though those other funds aren't getting inflows, we have a ton of money to manage. We pay commissions every time we're buying these stocks. MSOS this calendar year is still the best performing. So there were a lot of questions last year about when the fund would get inflows and it's not an index. I would still decide when we're putting that money to work or not putting that money to work. Sometimes we'd hold back a little bit of cash cushion. We were never holding back cash cushion for redemptions. That's dumb. ETFs aren't supposed to hold cash. It's a portfolio manager choice if we were holding a little bit of cash because we didn't put it to work all at once. But we were pushing around those prices sometimes to undue effect. And what we've done in the last 6-9 months or year is communicated even more with all the market makers out there. And we're saying, hey, Mr. Market Maker, Mrs. Market Maker, if you are creating shares of this fund, usually an ETF gets all the shares delivered in kind. We have all these total return swaps. So we get cash in lieu of all those positions. So you got a market maker out there building up positions, creating units of the fund, which is just the normal process of an ETF. But then they need to dump shares of GTI, of Curaleaf, of Verano, of TerraSend, all the others. So we've communicated to most of the market makers out there. Some of them keep themselves masked. We don't know exactly who they are, but most of them we have good communication with. And we say, hey, call up our counterparty and ask them if they want to buy those shares. So sometimes I get alerts of, hey, we got a natural seller out there selling shares. Do you want to buy them? And I say, yes, I will buy those shares. So we're sometimes people are saying, what's up with these shares traded after the close? Well, they're actually on the close. And when there's a creation in the fund or redemption in the fund, we are taking in that inventory, taking out that inventory, not having undue volatility in the fund. And that's why some people say, oh, why are they buying shares today? Because money came into the fund. It's supposed to go into shares.
Yeah.
We found a smoother way to do it. Oh, why is Dan selling at these prices? I'm not choosing to sell. There was a small redemption in the fund. It takes out a representative slice of a bunch of shares. And again, without undue volatility in the stocks or in the fund. And we think we're doing what's right for the shareholders.
Yep. How are you best preparing as we get into an earnings season here? Is it like kind of a conservative approach? Like, you look at, an earnings season. This earnings season feels a little bit different than previous quarters, knowing some of the news that we got back in September. However, soon after that is tax loss selling season. So it's kind of a tricky time because we are thinking that we're going to probably get some pretty positive earnings reports. However, that, segues into tax loss selling season. So what's the best approach, or how are you guys handling that moving forward into next, or I should say we're now into the month of November?
Well, a question, comes to me as a portfolio manager of the fund: is information or knowledge or even conjecture going to change the way the fund's investing?
Okay.
So some stocks might have, a little bit more, better anticipated earnings than others, such as, great exposure to Maryland. Everybody's in love with Maryland right now for good reason. But for the most part, it's not going to change the way I'm investing the fund. So I need to back up a step and say, I said this is not an index, it's an actively managed fund. But again, we're talking about OTC traded cannabis stocks.
Yeah.
I'm not managing this thing tactically.
Yeah.
That would be insane. I'm not going to suddenly dump a bunch of TrueLeave and buy a bunch of something else. No, these things, they're liquid, but they're not that liquid, and I don't want to put any undue bid pressure on any of these names. So I'm kind of keeping head down, focus, move forward. Earnings upcoming, I'm looking forward to them. I'm hearing some good things.
Yep.
But it ain't gonna change the way I invest.
Headlines across the world. The day has finally come for SBF, convicted on all fraud charges. I know, Anthony, you're probably not surprised by this whatsoever. But the question is this a good thing for the crypto industry?
Yeah, so it's great. Stick his ass in jail for the rest of his life and throw away the key.
That's it.
To be completely honest. I mean, it just goes down to, I mean, he defrauded his investors, he stole from consumers, and I mean, he took good people's money. I
Yeah.
mean, when FTX went under and when all this money went missing, like, you can't forget, like, this was people's money. This wasn't venture capitalist money. This wasn't investors' money. This wasn't a fund. This was mom and pops on Main Street who had their deposits at FTX. They trusted them, and Sam Bankman-Fried ran amok with it. He paid off spokespeople. He paid off politicians. He bought his parents $20 million homes. He bought himself $1 million penthouses. Like, this is just egregious. Put his ass in jail. I hope he gets the 110 years that's maximum with all 7 charges, and he's never heard from again. I mean, he's a useful idiot, as far as I'm concerned.
He also laundered money to the Democratic Party, but both sides, actually, Republican Party and Democratic Party.
Money laundering was one of the charges of the 7. It was fraud, conspiracy, and money laundering. I hope he gets the maximum penalty and just put his ass in jail.
Yeah. You've said in the past, we wouldn't be here in the cannabis industry if it wasn't for Canada. When we look at SBF, is there anything positive that he did for this industry prior to all this fiasco? Nothing?
No. There's no net positive. Coinbase was around before him. Binance was around before him. FTX was a good story. FTX was a popular story, mostly because of the amount of money that he was pouring into earned media, because of him aligning himself with people like Kevin O'Leary, Tom Brady, and the likes of them, who I do truly believe did not know what was going on at FTX.
Yeah.
But I mean, at the same time, like, he was just nefariously, he was a bad actor.
Yeah.
I mean, he thought that he was going to push his way around politics, deploying the capital that was stolen from customers' deposits and being able to have influence. I'm sure there's going to be a movie that's going to be written about him. I'm sure there's going to be books, and there's going to be a lot of money that's going to be made off of this. But at the end of the day, I think there's about 18 billion that went missing. 8 billion of it has been identified. There's a big shortfall in there, and good people, Main Street people, lost money in this. I mean, and trust was broken in the industry. I mean, yeah, it's a good headline that he's finally going to jail, but the damage has been done, and it's arguable if the damage will ever be able to be repaired. So I mean, yeah, it's good to see this finally happen.
Yeah,
I think it's a minor miracle that despite all of this, BlackRock is still introducing ETF for Bitcoin. The confidence hasn't been shaken in some of the main cryptocurrencies. So does that show how resilient the industry is, Anthony?
It's BlackRock.
Yes and no. Yeah, yes and no. And I mean, I've said this a ton of times, and I'll keep saying it. The FTX thing was not a crypto problem. It was a human problem.
Yeah.
It was a bad actor that was in charge of a centralized exchange that happened to be the custodian of cryptocurrencies and crypto tokens and digital assets. It was not a breakdown on the blockchain. This was not Bitcoin getting exploited. This was not Ethereum getting exploited. If Vitalik Buterin tomorrow rugs the entire Ethereum ecosystem and throws away the keys, yes, that is an existential breakdown of the blockchain ecosystem. But in this instance, this was 100% operator human error, and all of the nefarious activities were done in the traditional financial sense. They weren't done on the blockchain.
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised at the resiliency or the entry of institutional players into the crypto industry as it stands today on the backs of what happened with FTX.
SBF convicted on all fraud charges. What is the legacy he leaves behind?
Madoff. The legacy he leaves behind is Madoff. He stole billions and billions of dollars from people, and he's going to rot in jail for the rest of his life. That's his legacy. He's not some savant. He's not the next Warren Buffett. He's a scumbag, and he's going to get what's coming to him.
You're an avid crypto investor. If Sam Bankman-Fried's sitting in front of you right now, what do you say to him?
I'd punch him.
You punch him?
I don't think I'd say anything to him. I'd just say he's a piece of shit. He had all the opportunity in the world to actually make a difference.
Yeah.
He had all the opportunity in the world to actually be a billionaire, be a philanthropist, and change humanity for the better if he had good intentions. He had that opportunity. That opportunity not a lot of people get. he literally flushed that opportunity down the toilet because he's a just bad actor.
Yep. Pretty much sums it up. But here we are 12 months later. It was around 12 months when we saw his fiasco. But I think, to your point, it's a good day. We can have closure and finally move on.
That being said, I mean, I know I seem pretty passionate about this, but I didn't lose any money in FTX.
Yeah, but
I didn't have
rightfully
my money
so.
on.
It's original investor OGs like yourselves that obviously are trying to educate people on this space as a whole. And let's face it. Remember when we were sitting with Kevin O'Leary a year ago in an Escalade driving down Wall Street, and it was clearly there was a lot of uncertainty, needless to say the least, about what's next for the industry. But we'll see where we go. But it sounds like with these ETFs, and if they could get passed by the SEC, this is actually a really turning point for this industry, and maybe a valuable lesson that we all learned pertaining to it.
Yeah.
Speaking of moving on, let's switch now to psychedelics and the original OG juggernaut company in the space, MindMed, Ben, who reported their latest earnings. They gave an update on their clinical pipeline, which many investors follow closely in the early stage research. They also reported current cash position as of September 30th, 2023 of $117.7 million compared to $142.1 million as of December 31st, 2022, which later they outlined that they think they're fully funded to be operational up until 2026. So all in all, as I said, Ben, how do you make of these latest earnings? And you think this company is finally past this turbulent point and they can now are heading in the right direction?
Not necessarily. I think that's going to be dependent upon the results of their main pipeline study. In terms of the earnings itself, I don't pay too much attention to them in the psychedelic space at this point. I mean, obviously, none of these companies are generating revenue unless you're in the clinic side. So really, it's about unless you have an outlier in terms of research and development cash or they're draining cash higher than expected. It's really just the operational results, and that's really what these earnings are all about to me. And fortunately, things seem to be on track. Mainly one of their main studies, MMED-008,
yes,
and that's an LSD study for general anxiety disorder. That a readout is coming in 2024, and for ADHD, it's coming in the first quarter of 2024 as well. So they seem to be on track with their readout schedule, and that's important. And whether they're funded till 2026, that might be a little optimistic based on the cash burn. We'll see. But all in all, I think pretty good operational highlights.
The readouts in 2024, that's the centerpiece right now of the research that has the LSD research that has many. We've had a lot of investors reach out to us and ask why we're not obviously following this company a little bit more, which we're obviously trying to do. Have you guys had a look at their clinical pipeline as to why everybody's so fixated on the research here?
I haven't, no. I haven't, no.
Yeah, I've been following their pipeline. It's the LSD is a big one. The next readouts are going to come in the first half of next year and the second half of 2024. But I think this company's been mostly on the sidelines because they haven't had a big catalyst cycle. These studies take, this study's been in the work for several quarters, and once that comes out, we'll have a little bit more clarity about what one of their main pipeline drugs is doing, how much reduction on matters, and all the scientific data that comes out in the readout, and then we'll have a little bit more talk on it. But I think it's sort of quiet period until those results come out. And fortunately, we're going to get some data probably within the next couple quarters, and for both studies within the next year.
Do you still consider them a leader in the space or one of the leaders?
I do. I mean, for LSD, I think they have the best pipeline. That's a little bit unknown because obviously that compound is, it's LSD and psilocybin are two different things. I think there's more data in terms of the robustness and efficacy of psilocybin and even MDMA assisted therapy, as we saw from MAPS. So LSD is very interesting, but I think there's not as much clinical data research in terms of the efficacy. So, it's very interesting. I want to see that data before I get really excited, but wait and see mode over here.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching. And if you want to learn more about the emerging industries that we cover, then leave a comment below and let us know who you want us to interview, the questions you want asked, and the information that you want to learn. We want to hear from you. As usual, click on that bell for all notifications to get the latest information Share this video with your network, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel because we would not be here without you. Thanks for watching, everyone.